We will recall from an earlier lecture that the U.S. government declared the frontier closed after the 1890 census. The wilderness that once beckoned settlers westward was declared fully settled, thereby eliminating the physical frontier that had until then symbolized boundless opportunity and the essence of American character and identity. This concept, articulated by historian Frederick Jackson Turner, posits that the American spirit, its distinctiveness and dynamism, was forged in the crucible of frontier expansion, embodying notions of liberty, self-reliance, and democratic equality. The frontier's closure raised pivotal questions about the future of American life and identity. It was in this context, as we moved into the 1890s, that the United States began to consider overseas imperial expansion. Prior to this period, the notion of an American empire was largely confined to the continental expanse of North America. The United States, through a series of territorial acquisitions, had effectively conquered the continent, securing access to abundant resources. This continental empire was largely self-sufficient, negating the immediate need for overseas colonies to procure raw materials. For instance, the burgeoning American cotton textile industry, unlike its British counterpart, did not initially require the establishment of colonies abroad to supply raw cotton, as the domestic supply was ample. However, as we ventured into the late 19th century, the global landscape was increasingly characterized by imperial competition. Nations sought to expand their dominions, securing sources of raw materials and markets for their goods in a bid to bolster national wealth and power. This era, marked by a stark imperialist ethos, presented a simple yet compelling dictum for the nations of the world. To modernize and expand was to survive and thrive, while failure to do so would relegate a nation to the periphery of global power dynamics. The United States in this era confronted the imperative of overseas expansion not merely as a means of economic necessity, but as a strategic endeavor to secure its position in the global hierarchy. The acquisition of territories such as Hawaii and the Philippines was emblematic of this shift, reflecting a recognition that the absence of new frontiers within the continental United States necessitated the pursuit of external ones. This expansion was not solely about securing resources, but also about asserting the United States' rising status as a global power, in line with the prevailing imperialist mindset that equated empire with national greatness and global influence. Thus, the transition towards overseas imperial expansion was a multifaceted phenomenon, driven by a complex interplay of economic, strategic, and ideological factors. It marked a significant evolution in American policy and identity, from a nation preoccupied with continental dominion to an emergent power on the global stage, seeking to navigate and shape the new world order of the 20th century. The Spanish-American War marked the beginning of the United States as an imperial power. The backdrop to the conflict centers on Cuba, a jewel in the declining Spanish Empire, where the local economy was heavily reliant on the export of sugar, much of which was destined for the United States. During this time, Cuba was embroiled in a fervent struggle for independence from Spain, a struggle that was met with harsh repression by the Spanish authorities. Simultaneously, within the United States, a fierce rivalry between two newspaper magnates, William Randolph Hearst of the Hearst newspapers and Joseph Pulitzer of the World, was unfolding. This competition was not merely about who could garner the most subscribers, but rather who could captivate the public's imagination more effectively. The method through which this was achieved was through sensational journalism, or as it came to be known, yellow journalism. This form of journalism sought to exaggerate and oftentimes fabricate shocking stories to attract readership. The narrative constructed by the press of a tyrannical colonial power oppressing a neighboring people yearning for freedom resonated deeply with the American public. It is within this context of heightened emotions and perceived moral imperative that the United States declared war on Spain. The catalyst was the sinking of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor. Despite a lack of conclusive evidence linking Spain to the incident, the tragedy was sensationalized by the American press, with vivid illustrations and stories that implicated Spanish forces in an act of sabotage. This coverage inflamed public opinion in the United States, fostering a clamor for intervention against Spain to support Cuban independence, drawing parallels with America's own revolutionary past. The conflict itself was brief and decidedly one-sided. The Spanish Empire, already weakened and overstretched, found its naval capabilities particularly wanting. Reports of Spanish ships sinking due to disrepair before even engaging in battle underscore the decrepitude of Spain's military might at the time. The war, which President Theodore Roosevelt would later refer to as a splendid little war, concluded in a matter of weeks, resulting in a decisive victory for the United States. This victory heralded the dawn of a new era for the United States on the world stage, marking its emergence as a global power with overseas territories. The acquisition of former Spanish colonies such as Puerto Rico and the Philippines not only expanded the United States' strategic and economic reach, but also signaled its entrance into the complex web of global imperialism. In the aftermath of the war, the United States found itself in control of what remained of the Spanish Empire. However, Cuba remained independent. The reason for this highlights the range of views of empire within the United States and foreshadows a significant soul-searching over the acquisition of empire by the American people. The Teller Amendment, passed by the United States Congress in the early stages of the war, was a declaration of the United States' intentions towards Cuba. It explicitly stated that the United States did not enter the conflict with the aim of annexing Cuba, but rather it was propelled by a moral imperative to aid the Cuban people in their struggle against Spanish oppression. This commitment was emblematic of a broader discourse on the role and responsibilities of the United States on the international stage. The United States was not a colonizer as other great powers, but a global defender of its founding ideals. The aftermath of the war, however, thrust the United States into a vigorous national debate, known as the imperialist-anti-imperialist debate. This discourse centered on the ethical, political, and economic implications of acquiring an overseas empire. Proponents of imperialism argued for the expansion of American influence and the benefits of economic and strategic gains, while opponents raised moral objections, concerns over the principle of self-determination, and the fear of entanglement in foreign conflicts. In our next segment, we will discuss the imperialist-anti-imperialist debate, its terms, and its outcome. Please proceed to answer the questions in the assignment on Canvas. If you have any questions, you can post them in the open forum discussion or contact the professor using Canvas email.